so restrained, holds tightly to the reins, but sings a different tune behind the moon, behind the moon, behind the moon. She finds the moon's the only place to go that's far enough away to hold.
And we're back with Reality Check, where it's mind over chatter. And we're here for the second part of our great interview with Jane O'Hare, who works for a major global airline and is talking about her experiences both as a younger person and as an adult. And Jane, welcome back again.
Nice to be here.
And I wanted to talk to you about any experiences that you may have had in traveling that may have been strange or unconventional.
In my role that I played with the airline, I did do a lot of traveling, and what I did find was the most challenging was that I never slept from the time I would arrive in the new place until it was time to come home, whether that be 2 days or 5 days.
Really?
Yes.
So if, let's say it was a 5-day layover, you'd be up for the whole 5 days?
Yes.
Now, did you consciously do something to keep yourself up, or you were just up?
No, I was just up, and I did try to counteract that with, you know, melatonin and some herbal remedies, and but nothing seemed to help.
Wow, that is very interesting. And one of the side effects of programming is not being able to sleep well. I'm famous for, of course, being cranky, but also famous for being up all the time. I sleep maybe an hour, if I'm lucky, every night, and sometimes not at all. And yet it doesn't seem to affect my function, although the viewers might think so. So, curious, did you feel like you crashed at the end of those 2 to 5 days, or however long it was? What happened after you got home where you went back into a normal cycle?
It would take a little while, but I would be able to sleep when I would return home. But the longest I ever went without sleep on these trips was 10 days.
Wow, for 10 full days you were up?
Yes, not 1 minute of sleep.
Oh, may I ask where that was, or you don't want to reveal that?
You know, I can't really remember. It may have been on a trip to Asia.
So it was overseas. And how about the other people that you went with? Did they react the same way, or did they have a sleep cycle?
Yeah, they had a sleep cycle. I seemed to be the only one with the difficulty.
And were you like wide awake, or were you just tired and just couldn't sleep?
Wide awake.
Amazing.
Yes, it was, and frustrating too.
Now that is, if I may go into that, part of a programming category that we call Monarch, which you, I think, know about, and viewers may have seen that on my website. I have the Diary of a Monarch. Monarchs are program people who basically are used often as go-betweens or liaisons between political figures or relatively well-known figures where communication could be monitored. So they use the monarch, what they call a slave, monarch slave, to go between the various locations and deliver messages. And one of the side effects of the programming is to always be up and on, so you're always aware of your environment all the time. Even when you're sleeping, even if you do sleep, very often the monarchs will have their eyes opened, and they have a sleep altar that comes forward to watch the body while the rest of the altars are sleeping or not forward.
Well, that's
so
fascinating.
They never rest.
Huh. That is fascinating.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, and those of you who've ever seen my programming tapes on the history of mind control, I talk about the very first monarch in the U.S. who was named Candy Jones. And she basically was programmed in the late 40s, early 50s. And where did they send her? Asia. One of the places that she had gone as a courier was Taipei in Taiwan, which is a major Asian programming center. So I don't know if that rings any bells for you as far as travel is concerned.
Yeah. You know, I think I probably would have paid more attention had I been familiar with your work at the time, but I've just come to it recently, so I wasn't really looking for any of those things.
When you came back from these trips, let's say the 5 or 10 days you were up, did you have to catch up on your sleep, or did you just go into a regular cycle after that?
I would go into a cycle. I would sleep for one day for about 15 hours.
Ah.
And then I would go into a more normal cycle after that.
So like a one-day catch-up,
Yes.
and then you were ready to go. That's really amazing. Most people would be unconscious for like weeks
Yes.
after that. You know, they should take a sample of your blood to see what can keep you up like that. But unfortunately, when they program people, it is very much narcotics that they use to keep you up. So I'm curious if you were to do some deprogramming techniques and go back, let's say, to that 5 or 10 day period when you were up, if you would recall someone injecting you with something or some experience that you weren't consciously remembering, but still physically encountered, where you were forcefully made to stay awake, because it is not natural for a human body to stay awake that long without crashing and just falling asleep. After 2 or 3 days, you just conk out.
Yes.
So it's not natural for 5 or 10 days to be like that. Did you ever think about that?
Yes, I kept hoping that the 3 days, you know, I'd crash or something, but nothing seemed to work, and it seemed the harder I tried, the more awake I was. So I was very unsuccessful in that attempt to sleep.
Did anyone notice a difference in your personality?
No. Nobody ever mentioned anything.
No. What about your food intake? Was it a normal breakfast, lunch, dinner type of thing?
Yes, since that was really all I could do while I was awake. I looked forward to every meal.
You didn't go out into the city or wherever you were at night because you couldn't sleep?
No, I would stay in the hotel at night, but in the daytime I would go into the city and, you know, browse around and, you know, try and tire myself by walking and doing some exercise.
Interesting. I know, for example, when I was in Taiwan, the energy there is very heavy and dense, and I kind of went into reclusive mode. I didn't want to be in the public or out with there because I felt there was a very negative energy in that area. But every time I go there, usually just after I leave, there's a massive earthquake. Like every time I leave, like I just miss it.
Oh my.
So it's very interesting.
There was a little minor earthquake there. I was awake, obviously, and I felt it, and I asked everybody else. They were all asleep, though. They didn't feel
And
it.
didn't believe you that it really happened.
Exactly. But it was on the news the next day that there had been a minor one. So, yeah.
Well, in the travel industry, I'd like to talk about protection techniques. Do you use any when you travel?
Yes, I do put violet around the plane, as is one of your recommendations. But I do know that there are nervous flyers, and I wondered if there were any of your techniques that can be shared.
Okay. One thing and that always brings a little funny story to mind of protection techniques and how to use them, which I'll connect to the nervous flyers, I promise. But I was once on a flight from Orlando to New York, and it was another airline, not yours. And the flight attendant noticed one of the pendants I was wearing as what she called sacred geometry. And she said, "Oh, I'm very involved in that. After we take off, come up to the front cabin. I'll talk to you about it." So I said, "Okay." And we took off, and then she called me up, and she said she was involved in color therapy, which is what I teach. And I said, "Well, what do you do to protect the plane when you're traveling? What are your techniques?" She says, "Oh, I ground and anchor the plane to the ground." And she uses brown color. I'm like, oh my God. I wanted to grab her, but I'd be arrested if I did. And I said, don't ever, ever do that, because brown is a grounding energy, and it will pull the plane down. I said, don't ever anchor the plane. I said, you keep it in the higher colors, in the violet, you know, or at least royal blue, but nothing below royal blue and violet. And that's why it's curious to me about some airlines, like, for example, if I'll name Braniff, because they're not around anymore, and they painted their planes brown, you know, and they're not around anymore.
Oh, that's interesting.
You see, so I thought that was very interesting as well. So always violet, violet, and always keep the plane in the middle of the tetrahedron, inside the violet octa, all in violet. So
That's
always
good
always
advice.
remember that, and even when there's turbulence, because I notice a lot of passengers get nervous and jittery when there's turbulence.
Yes.
And so if you keep the plane in that violet,
Uh-huh.
and then visualize that the tetrahedron inside the octahedron, the plane in the very center, and then visualize it on a string, a real tight string,
Uh-huh.
so that it's flying along this really tight string and it can't move. It's straight. Every time I try that, the turbulence stops.
Oh, that's great.
Even when they announce we're going to go through 35 minutes of turbulence, or there's going to be moderate turbulence, I just thought, no, I don't think so. You know, well, first I have my vodka, and then I say, no, we're going to have the violet, and I keep the line really tight, and then it just smooths out.
Oh, that's
And you
great.
should try that.
I will try that.
And so that's for any nervous passenger, okay? Always remember, balance your T-bar, center yourself, no brown.
Yes,
You
no.
want to stay in royal blue, violet, nothing less than that when
You
you're
put your whole
flying.
body in those
Whole body
colors?
and even the entire aircraft.
Okay.
I say stay in the violet, and that will keep you protected and keep it up,
Yes.
and it will be a good thing instead of any jitteriness.
Oh,
And even when you're going through security and you're going through those metal detectors and that type of thing, stay in the violet.
yeah.
You see, you know, as a programmed person who originated in the Montauk Project,
Yeah.
I have a lot of implants in my body. One was even actually, well, a couple of them have been x-rayed and you can see them, and they're metallic. And there was, when the security after 9/11 really got heavy and things were going on, I always beeped.
Oh.
No matter what I was wearing or not wearing, it would beep. So I started to go through the security in violet. I just said, well, I'm going to put myself in the violet. And no more beeping.
Oh, now that is interesting.
Yeah, it worked for me.
Oh.
So it just blocks now that doesn't mean you try to get a weapon through.
No.
It's just for your own protection
Yes.
and to help go through security.
Oh,
So
very
you
interesting.
can relay that on to whoever wants to know.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any protection techniques for programmed people in general? I know the merger symbol.
Yes.
I do have one of those at home. Is there any way to protect your house that you live in? or-
Right, and that's a very important question, because everyone is bombarded with ELF and microwave just by living on the Earth. Earth is ringed with satellites. There's those cell towers, radar towers if you live near the airport, constant ELF and microwave bombardment. And as a programmed person, you're much more sensitive to that, and most of the time they're bombarding to throw you into an altar anyway. So if you keep yourself and your home or your vehicle in a violet egg-shaped field
Okay.
and visualize a mirror facing towards the outside around that egg shape,
Okay.
then any ELF or microwave coming towards you is reflected away, and anything that penetrates that mirror and enters into the violet is filtered, and then you will remain intact and keep your integrity. The violet acts as not only protection but a filter
Oh.
of the energy,
Huh.
which is why it's at the crown chakra.
Yes.
Because the energy that comes into the crown chakra, especially through the fontanelle and the opening at the top of the head, needs to be filtered.
Yes.
So that your body is like a bottle, and this is the cap, needs to be on securely.
Okay. I was very interested in, I had read your Confessions of an Oversold Junkie.
Oh, yes.
And how you had gotten such good results from, that connection. And I wonder how you know when you've made that connection, and can you talk about any of those experiences?
About the oversoul connection?
Yeah.
Basically, once you keep that silver infinity symbol over the crown chakra
Yes.
area, you're in connection to oversoul.
Okay.
And then everything that you're getting is coming through that.
Oh.
Basically, you can only be connected to oversoul. You can't ever not be connected to it. It's just a matter of how aware you are
Okay.
of that.
Huh.
So that's one way of doing it. Some people, instead of visualizing the silver infinity, have a way of imaging a very bright sun or star mentally outside of their energy field that is their oversoul, and they connect to that. So whatever you feel is an adequate method, from an archetype symbol or hyperspace perspective, the silver infinity is the symbol.
I've heard you talk about frequencies and some people do well in certain areas based on their frequency. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because are there some areas that are more program type areas, and perhaps a programmed person should not live in those areas?
Yes, and in fact, on previous shows we've talked about that, where you should live, whether you're programmed or not, where your energy matches the location of where you're living. So for example, it's like being a certain puzzle shape that fits into a slot of a particular area. And certain areas, well, not certain, all areas have natural energies or frequencies that have a certain quality about them. And that's why people are attracted to those areas, because they're matching those frequencies with their own personal energy, or they need to go to that energy to learn something so they can go somewhere else.
I see.
But ultimately, whether you're programmed or not, you should live in an area where you match the frequency. Otherwise, and I've told this to many clients, that it's like being a plant growing in the wrong soil. It's like being a palm tree growing in Wisconsin.
Yes.
You know, you might survive a little bit, but ultimately you're not going to do very well.
Yeah.
See, so but if you are in the right environment, you'll not only grow, but you'll blossom and spread. And that's what you have to do. So you look at the person's name frequency, their genetics, their energy field, and then you look at mentally at a map of, let's say, the U.S. or globally, if they're willing to go anywhere, and see where does this energy package fit? Where is there a fit? And you know those children games where they have those little silver balls and you shake it and they fall into little slots? It's kind of like that. You look at where this energy package fits into the slot on the earth. And that's where that person belongs. And there could be a range of areas. It may not be just one spot, but there could be one that's better than another. So I do that for people, or I teach people how they can do that for themselves.
Well, that's very interesting. If you change your name through marriage or your premature birth, so your birthday is not the same as the original birthday maybe you were slated to have, does that change your frequency?
Well, absolutely, because when a person is born, it's not an accident where they're born and what time they're born, because the earth also has a cycle and an energy flow, just like humans have an aura and a chakra system. The earth also has an energy system. And so when you enter into the earth plane, your energy can only fit into the slot at the certain time where there's a match. So that if you're born prematurely or if you're overdue, it could very well, it is because you're not fitting into the official birth slot time that the doctor gave your mother. Doesn't match. So you have to go either before or after, whatever that match is, and enter in at that time. I don't know if that answers your question specifically.
Oh, it does,
but
yeah.
That's what happens. And yes, that would indicate that the mind pattern you have is different than what people expected you to have. So that your life path will be different, obviously, than if you were born on the expected date, because that would be a different cycle, a different category of energies.
That's very interesting.
So how far in advance were you born?
I was born about 3 or 4 weeks premature.
Okay. Was there a concern about your survivability?
I think the year before they were giving the children pure oxygen, so they were coming out blind. So fortunately, I had missed that.
Good.
Yes, but I always have had like delicate health. You know, I had you know, buck teeth, duck feet. You know, heavy adenoids that had to be removed twice. So you know,
twice.
Yeah.
That's unusual.
Couldn't breathe.
Why would they have to remove it twice? Did it get the whole time, or they grew back?
Well, they said both those things, actually. They said, well, you know, it could be that we didn't get it, or, you know, that they grew back, but these are huge, they said, when they took them out.
How old were you when that happened?
The first time I had them removed, I was 5, and then I had them removed when I was 12.
That's very fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, either my opinion is they probably didn't get it all the first time, and so the cells just regenerated. Because if they really removed it the first time, they wouldn't grow back like that, because there'd be nothing to generate or spontaneously generate the cells again. That also can be from from programming, and I'll tell you why. It's because if we assume, we'll give the doctors the benefit of the doubt, that the first surgery they actually remove the entire organ, and yet it grew back, that would indicate something happened to open up the genetic instructions of that area to regenerate the organs all over again. And the only thing that would do that would be some kind of ELF or microwave pulse of a specific nature that would open up the instructions and regenerate the cellular tissue.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that would be also a clue that there was something going on in programming. Interestingly enough, I also had my adenoids removed as well as my tonsils at the same time, only I hemorrhaged after that. I had to go into the hospital to stop the hemorrhaging.
So you had to go in for 2 surgeries then? Or?
Well, I had to go for the surgery, and then I had to go for recovery because the surgery did something that wasn't right.
Yeah, and it's not a fun surgery,
No,
is it?
it isn't. It's very painful, and it's hard to breathe.
Yes.
You know, but when you're 4 and 5 years old,
it's scary too.
Right, absolutely. And the interesting thing is that my surgery was not in a hospital, it was in the attic of the doctor's house.
Why?
That's a whole nother show.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I had been taken to the doctor when I was little, from the time I was about 5 or 6 until I was almost 12. Every Friday, every week, my mother would take me from school and take me to this big Victorian mansion in another part of the city where I would be the only patient. And I'd be observed building blocks and other things and have excruciating examinations, and then ultimately led to the surgery.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is a very unusual story.
It's a very unusual story. And the other unusual part is that what I would build with the blocks was cemeteries. They'd say to me, "What are you building?" And I'd say, "Oh, this is a cemetery." Now, if you know about programming, you know that cemeteries are what we call a construct within the mind pattern, and altars are buried in the graves and then extracted as needed. So that the cemetery becomes a holding section of the matrix for altars that are not going to be needed for a long time, so they have to be deeply buried literally in the mind. So the imagery in the mind is as a cemetery, so you know that it's only buried and can't be extracted until necessary.
Interesting. I used to draw a lot of daisies and like the star.
How many points in the star?
Let's see. You know, it was like the A that you went.
So it was like a 5-pointed star, like you have on a Christmas tree.
Yeah, 5-pointed stars, and then I would draw like a circle that came down, and then I'd make it into a swan because it looked like the beak of the.
Now, have you read any of the Montauk books?
No.
In one of the Montauk books, it's written that in the early days of programming at Montauk, let's say early 70s, they would program children with Swan Lake. Yes, the overture of Swan Lake. And that the people would doodle swans all the time, or draw swans.
That was my favorite doodle.
Interesting. What programming do you have from Montauk Project? Interesting. That might be something that you want to look at.
Yeah.
And you mentioned also something else before the swans.
The daisy the star.
Yeah. And okay, the star we know is a satanic symbol. It's used in ritual, and a lot of monarch women have that as a imprinting in their mind, especially in the green color. It's also a part of the Green Star programming for alien invasion scenarios, which is something, a whole other show for that one. But the other thing that you mentioned as far as the daisies.
Yeah.
Now, you know who Dr. Mengele was from World War II in the concentration camps, where he performed these terrible psychological and physical experiments on the inmates at the concentration camps. Well, one of the things that he did when he programmed the children, he would take 2 children, and he'd have a daisy, and he would do "I love you not," and when he got to the last panel, it was "I love you not." That child would be executed in front of the child that was watching, as an imprinting, so that could be you if you don't accept the programming that's being given to you, and that embeds on the child, of course, through fear and trauma, fragments the mind, and yet the daisy then becomes a symbol of the programming. It's called "I love you not" programming, or daisy programming, which was invented by Dr. Mengele.
Interesting. Huh. Was that put into people at any certain time period, like the 50s, 60s, or?
That was basically late 40s through the 50s, and contrary to history, Mengele survived the war and actually was brought to the U.S. and South America, where he lived until the 1980s.
Wow.
And in the United States, he was called either Dr. Green or Greenberg, where he had something with the color green in his name. Green being the satanic olive green, lime green, satanic ritual color with the 5-pointed star and the daisy.
Wow.
You see?
Yeah.
So you didn't know you had all that stuff in your little head, huh? Did you?
No, I just thought I was doodling.
Yeah. Doodles come from the mind, and what we're doodling is what's coming cycling forward, either in our mind patterns or from our programming.
Makes me want to go back in my diaries that I kept as a child and see what other doodles I may have had.
That actually is a way of deprogramming, because if you go back in your journals and you look at the images and you see repetitive images, then you can be sure those are a label on a particular function or group of authors in your matrix. So if you hold that, whatever that image is, let's say for your case a daisy or swan, and you hold it at the pineal, first you do your preliminaries. Do your breathing, balance your T-bar, center in royal blue, then take, let's say, the swan, hold it at the pineal, and you simply observe what comes up.
Okay.
And when you're done with that, remove the swan, put a brown merger, balance, cleansing breath, get out of it, write down everything that you observe. Do the same thing with the daisy. See what that brings up for you. Keep different sections in your notebook or log on the various techniques. Don't keep them all combined. You want to separate them because they represent different functions and alter groups within your programming matrix. And we're coming again to the end of our show.
Oh.
And so, Jane, I wanted to tell you that you've been a really super fantastic guest.
Thank you.
Even if you are programmed and you have all these weird things in your head, but you're in good company, because we all do one way or another. So thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me and sharing all of your knowledge with me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So,
how are you doing?
I think it went.
Count to perfection. 1, 2, 3. Right on a silver infinity. Golden waves on a purple cruise. Find your center and scan the moon. Climb a green ladder to light.